Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today I am making a school-related build. As some of you may know, I am a teacher by day. I teach in a small town in East Texas, and it is 11 to 14-year-olds that I am trying to shape the minds of. I teach business information management and art. Both of which are very different in and of themselves, but at the same time, I have the ability to incorporate some of my things like YouTube making into the mix of the projects that we do in class. So there is a small element of fun. Now, the modern teenage student is not impressed with a sub 1 million subscriber channel. So needless to say, when they hear I do YouTube, it's really not that big a deal. But I know that a lot of teachers out there are just starting to get their classes together and get their years going, and I thought it would be fun to make a build dedicated to my fellow teachers. So starting year 17 of my education journey as a teacher, I am going to build an apple, kinda, out of foam. Let's get to building. So after I reminded myself of what an apple looks like, I started pulling random chunks off of offcuts from previous projects to put this large apple together. I used 48mm and 24mm EVA foam for most of this build. You could definitely use thinner stuff, but you just have to make more layers of it or make the apple smaller. Because it is chunked out and carved, I don't have a pattern for this build. You could also make it out of XPS insulation foam or a number of other materials that you may have access to. The only new pieces that I used here were for the top and the bottom layers. So with the base layer trimmed out, now I just need to cut up these chunks to have flat faces that can be pieced together. Anywhere that I get gaps, I just plug it with more foam in. It's hard to believe that I am on year 17 already. It seems like just a couple of years ago I was getting started. All 17 years have been at the same school district on the same campus. I've been there long enough to not only teach kids' older siblings, but now I am teaching kids of my former students and working alongside students that I taught. I have no words to describe how proud that makes me to have been a small part of the development of future educators. I try to be mindful of this as much as possible and help them navigate their first couple of years, which usually are the hardest. With this big chungus glued up, I need to start carving into it. I switch over to a 3D model on the website Sketchfab to get a better reference for all angles. Using a sharp box cutter, I start carving away at the shape. Once the bulk of the excess is removed, I switch over to a rotary tool and a belt sander and smooth over the surfaces. For all my teacher friends out there, I know how difficult it can be to prepare for each year. The summer workshops, days of free time before you actually have to go go back or sacrifice to make your classroom as engaging as possible. The countless amount of dollars you spend to give your kids every advantage that the school budget won't cover. I see you and I thank you. You have no idea the impact your time, money, and heart can be for your students. I started shaping the bottom of my apple, and in less than a minute, the rotary tool shot off a sanding drum directly at my face. Luckily, I had my face shield on and avoided a nasty wallop to the face or possibly even scratching my eye. Please wear proper protective gear while sanding foam. Those bits spinning at 35,000 RPMs can do a lot more damage than you think. I put a new bit on and continued working. Speaking of new, my school is currently going through massive renovations, and I was lucky enough to get a brand new art room this year. It is massive with like 15-foot ceilings. I've had apartments and lived in houses smaller than my classroom is this year. We just finished our first week back, and I am so elated to see how excited my students are about their new learning environment. It's going to be an awesome year. The calyx, the weird little bits on the bottom of an apple, the remains of the apple blossom, I just cut out a couple of random pieces of leftover trimmed up foam and super glued it to the bottom. The stem at the top of the apple or pedicle is just carved out of a small chunk of 24mm foam and shaped with a rotary tool. Another crazy thing to think of is that at age 41, my first group of students are now in their early to mid 30s. If you're lucky enough to find a place to stay long enough, you'll see things come full circle. I don't know that I can go into many businesses in my town that don't have someone that I once taught. It's a great feeling to see your kiddos grow up and make it out on their own. I decided to make a worm to kind of act like a tongue for the apple. It's kind of weird, I know. I assure you that it begins by looking like something, and by the time I start carving into this invertebrate, it takes form, trust me. I glue a piece of fencing wire into a halved 36mm EVA dowel and carve back the ridges with my rotary tool. For all of you new teachers out there, I want you to know that those seasoned vets on your staff are just as nervous as you the first day. They've just become a bit more adept at hiding it a little better and tend to lean on previous moments of terror to calm themselves down. When I get overwhelmed, I think back to the quarantined COVID year and reaffirm that if I made it through that, so help me, I can make it through anything else. To fill some of those gaps and help smooth some of the rough areas, I put a couple of layers of Mod Podge down. The downside to using cheap brushes though is that often the bristles will pull out and then fall into your prop, so if you're not paying attention you may have permanent bristles in there. To all my teacher friends that have a couple of years under your belt, I want you to know that your fresh ideas and never-ending source of enthusiasm may make the older teachers roll their eyes a little bit, but we need your fresh eyes to remind us to be lifelong learners and stay positive. You also inspire the younger teachers who want to be as cool as you in your prime. Studies show that if you can make it past the first 3 to 5 years of teaching, you'll be a teacher your entire career. Two coats of Plasti Dip. I went ahead and spray painted the mouth off-white, and now that it's like 1,000 degrees in the shade at 8 a.m. in Texas, I'm gonna paint the rest of it in air condition with some acrylic paints. I put down rough layers in a base color and try my best to blend the colors in the middle. Several apples have this coloration as they ripen. I'm not claiming that this is one specific kind, but we'll say Fuji apple for the sake of inspiration. To all of the veteran teachers out there with 15 plus years of experience, retirement is closer than you think it is. Enjoy every second that you spend with your students and your fellow co-workers. The years seem to go by faster and faster. Resist the urge to be negative when your administrator changes everything on you in the blink of an eye. We must be adaptive and meet the needs of our kids. Your wisdom and experience can make or break the tone of the school year. I thought it would be funny to paint some like anime style eyes on the apple and the worm. Just a little bit of two different shades of a color can make a really nice pop for an eye, and don't forget to add the white glare in the pupils. The tradition of giving a teacher an apple in the US dated back to the early 1800s. In rural areas where cash was scarce, local communities were responsible for housing and providing for the teachers to educate the local children. Apples were abundant on the American frontier and given as a gesture of respect for their hard work. Bing Crosby repopularized the gesture in the 1930s with the recording An Apple for the Teacher. So I decided to make my large, ginormous apple to commemorate all of those educators that made me feel special and loved. So many amazing teachers out there that inspired me to devote my career to the craft. Assembly is simple. I made a little scanning sticker for my apple on my computer and printed it on sticky paper. You know, the piece of plastic that you partially eat because you forget it's on there when you take your first bite. Then I just super glued on the stem and the worm. Thank you to my second grade teacher, Miss Cortez, for giving me the only C on my report card I ever had. You taught me to work hard. Thank you to my 8th grade history teacher, Mr. Hankins, for showing me compassion and not giving me those swats when I stood up to a bully. Thank you to my home ec teacher in high school, Mrs. Hancock, for being an amazing educator who truly cares for every kid that she has. Thanks to Coach Nickerson for holding me to a higher standard and teaching me so many life lessons as a young man. Thank you to my college professor, Mrs. McNeil, for teaching me how to be an effective teacher using that rigor and pedagogy. And thank you to Coach Ellerby, Coach Ives, and Mrs. Kennedy for showing me the ropes as a new teacher. And thank you to everyone out there who has dedicated their lives to helping children. You are amazing people, and I am truly blessed to be among you all. Next time you see a teacher, thank them. We are finished. Here is the end result. He's a bit derpy. I like the little added sticker on there like you'd see on an apple so you could ring it up. But yeah, initially I was gonna go creepy and monsterish, but as I started to work on it, it just felt like something that should be a little bit cutesy, and having both an apple smiling and the worm that is popping out of him, it made more sense. So yeah. Maybe you will try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to give a teacher an apple a day to keep the failing grades away. Yeah, probably not. Maybe you'll get some.
Yay!
And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these. Tell them, much props. Yeah, I guess it's time to go make some lesson plans and get ready for tomorrow. Peace out. If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and want to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.